the old building. It's amazing that they did it within a couple of days.
Yes, we are. Okay, we're going live.
Looks like we're alive, Iris.
Yes,
Okay
yes,
to
we
start.
are.
All right. So I'd like to start. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, April 12th, 2021 Plan Commission and Commission for Citizen Involvement meeting. I'd like to now call the meeting to order. Iris, would you please call the roll?
Beckett,
Here.
Fisher,
Here.
Heap,
Here.
Leek,
Here.
Pepe,
Here.
Semler is excused, Stewart.
Here.
Great, thank you. We have a quorum. First on our agenda tonight is a council update. I see we have Councilor Mboop with us. Councilor Mboop, would you like to give
Richard,
us
can
a
we hang
council
up now?
update? Hey, Iris, if you'd like to go on mute while you're talking in the background. Councilor Mboop, you're on mute too. If you'd like to give us a council update, you may proceed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Chair Heap. I think what I have of interest for the board is that Scott came to the council and update us on and advise us on things before we signed the MOU with the county and for the affordable housing on Lake Grove. It was very important that, we all discuss, and the board, the whole entire, it was a majority of the council that voted for that to sign the MOU with the county, and also the work with the North Anchor project is working very well, and we had also update from the city here. So I think that's the main things that we are working on. We also have the Boones Ferry Road project that's going on. We have a date of when it will end, in like 2 months before, like 2 months earlier than it was expected to end, which means next fall instead of December. So I think that's the only thing. We also talk about the something of interest for the board is the discussion is going on with people at the Stafford Hamlet, and they met with almost all the council, and they will have a presentation to the council, and when it happens I will update. I think that's what it is. Scott, if there is anything I forgot. Thank you.
Yeah, Councilor Mboop, I believe that presentation or study session with the Stafford Hamlet is scheduled for your next meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, it's for next meeting. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. The presentation is next meeting, which is the 23rd, I think. So.
20th.
Yeah, the 20th. I will update again the council, the board on that, and yeah, I think that's what I have.
Yeah, thanks, Councilor Mboop. Commissioners, any questions or comments for the councilor?
I do.
Commissioner Fisher.
Councilor Mboop, you said that a majority of the council voted for the affordable housing. It sounds like somebody or a group of somebody's didn't. I didn't get a chance to see the city council meeting. Could you give me an idea of what the arguments were against it or why they voted against it?
Evan, I wanted to ask Evan, can I discuss about those study session here?
Yeah, the study session's fine. Those are public record.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, no, yeah. No, yeah, there was only one person who were against. It was 6-1. And I don't, I think it's because they think that it might, because of how the nature of the affordable housing. I think, I don't know really what is their rationale to be against it, because all the city, we know it's opportunities for some people, of the community. I was even saying we should not say affordable housing. We should say housing that can house folks who are working in Lake Oswego, like teachers, fire marshal, police officers, and as the folks who work here, that's those people. There will be people that are, that are also maybe of as a background, but that's, I don't understand the rationale of them not voting for that, and I respect their position, but it was a majority. Some people are against affordable housing because maybe it's the term, or I really, I respect my council members who differ from what we believe, and their rationale was no, we should let Lake Oswego the way it is, and Yeah.
Thank you, Councilor Boop. Commissioners, any other questions? I don't see any other questions. So thank you, Councilor Boop, for coming and give us the council update tonight. Appreciate it. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a citizen comment. This is regarding issues not on the agenda. This is an opportunity to raise issues regarding planning. A time limit of 3 minutes per individual applies. To speak during the meeting, those should have emailed Iris by noon today, and then received the Zoom login information. Written comments could be submitted by noon today, and they would be shared during the citizen comment period. My understanding, Iris, is that we did have one individual that would like to make a citizen comment tonight.
That's correct. I'll move
Mr.
him.
Ormsby? Yeah.
Yes, I'll move him over. He's moved over now.
I don't see him, but Mr. Ormsby, are you on? Yes, I see you now. So Mr. Ormsby, we'd like to allow you to make a citizen comment tonight. Again, hopefully you heard there's a limit of 3 minutes, but please state your name and address for the record, and then please make your comments. Well, you're on mute, Mr. Ormsby.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Charles Ormsby. I go by the nickname Skip. My address for the purposes of this is still 170 Southwest Birds Hill Road, Portland, Oregon, 97219. Currently, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. This is where I've wintered this year. Anyway, my issue was, what is the Committee for Citizen Involvement doing with respect to the council? I found this past weekend, I could not get the council future schedule. That's a critical document. That gives me time to get into things and find out what stuff is going, such as affordable housing and things that are not being done on that, mainly accessible transportation. Lake Grove's, if you don't know, is a transit black hole. It's darn near impossible. The witching hour for the TriMet buses is about 5 o'clock from the LO Transit Center, and it's just pathetic after hours. It's been that way for the majority of my life. Anyway, my concerns are also with what is the Planning Commission, aka Citizen Involvement Committee, doing with the Tryon Creek Wastewater Treatment Plant. If you don't know, this is about a $250 million project, and things are going to be decided and started being cast in stone within about 2 weeks. This is a critical project. And I do not believe the public involvement process is anywhere near satisfactory. And I've outlined that in my testimony that I submitted. Yes, it was late, so you probably haven't seen it. Main concern is that Foothills is uninhabitable for 24/7 work and habitation. You can cross-reference the stuff I have done down there. I'm extremely concerned now, and I mean extremely concerned with the Lake Oswego Dam, Oswego Lake Dam, and then about 5 dams on the Clackamas River and 1 dam on the Tualatin River. If you go to the National Dam Inventory, they're all their hazard rating is suspect or significant in terms of failure after 9.0 CSC. This has never been discussed. 3 words have never been correlated into one document at one time for the past 20 years. And that is dam, earthquake, and flood. You guys need to start doing this stat. You've got a project, I believe LU 2020-0005, which is coming up, or you should be aware of. That setting with FEMA, the flood issues. And then with respect to the prospectus of the EPCOR taking over the sewer plant in about 2 weeks, or starting to, you got problems. People don't know this is occurring. And the citizen involvement process needs to be significantly improved.
Mr. Ormsby, you're at the 3-minute mark. I'll recognize you for 1 more minute, but please try to wrap up your comments.
Everything's there linked, and you can read it at your leisure. But
right.
you
Thank you.
better know what's coming down.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Director Siegel, comment you'd like to make?
Thank you. Well, Mr. Ormsby is still, if he's still online, or if not, I can follow up with him. There is a link that'll take you directly to the future City Council meeting schedule, and it's on the City Council page. And if you look under, if you use the menu pull down to the left, it'll take you to City Council meetings, and under meetings, you have several options, one of which is the future meeting schedule.
I'll check it out and test it.
Yeah, happy to send a link to you, Skip.
I got it this afternoon from, and not Iris, but the city recorder, and I will test it out. But
okay.
They're cross-linked into the council blog, which was the usual site of it.
Got it. Yeah, and I believe the city is discontinuing the blog, so I think we just need to get the word out.
Yep.
Director Siegel, one more question, and that Mr. Ormsby raised was the commission's involvement for the Tyrone Creek wastewater treatment plant. Could you comment, as far as I'm aware, council has not directed us for any activities on that, but maybe you can give an update from staff.
Sure. The city is in the process of entering into a public-private partnership with a private firm that would finance, develop, operate, and maintain the wastewater treatment plant. And it's in the early stages. It's really in the agreement stage right now. It's not in a phase where it would come before the Planning Commission or the City Council. And we're expecting that there will be some land use planning that would need to occur around that before the project could be constructed. There may be some zoning modifications that would be required. And of course, that would come before the Planning Commission for recommendation to council. And of course, there would be development review applications that would come before the Development Review Commission before a treatment plant could be constructed. So really under both of those processes, there would be opportunities for public input and public involvement on different levels.
Right,
I don't have a schedule for the project itself.
Sure. Thank you, Director Siegel. And thanks for your comments, Mr. Ormsby, tonight. And, we will work with staff and with council on the next steps, as Director Siegel was mentioning. But we look forward to working with the public and the community in the future for any, work that the Plan Commission needs to do for the wastewater treatment plant. But thanks, Mr. Ormsby, for coming out and giving your comments tonight. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Iris,
May I follow up on a comment? with
Commissioner Beckett, yeah, go ahead.
Questions for Director Siegel. Has the city in recent years studied the impact of a Cascadia subduction zone earthquake and whether the surrounding dams, whether it's on the Clackamas or the Willamette, are at risk of failure, and what the impact on the foothills development would be?
Oh, that's a very large scope and large scoping question.
Yes, it
I think-
is. It's
yeah.
a huge scoping issue.
It's a big issue, and I can tell you that when the city developed the water system with the city of Tiger, the Lake Oswego Tiger Water Partnership, that system was designed to modern seismic standards. So that's one level of infrastructure has been modernized recently. The dam itself, was reconstructed after the flood in the 90s, and I couldn't tell you what specs, were at that time. But to answer your question, I think it depends on, what part of the infrastructure we're concerned about or we would want to understand better. And I'd be happy to, if that's something that the commission is interested in. Of course, you're going to be taking up the amendments to the flood hazard overlay in the near future. And as part of that, perhaps we could provide help with the chair organize a work session or maybe just an informational update on the city's natural hazards planning generally, whether it be flood, geologic hazards, wildfire, whatever it is that you're interested in. That might be an opportunity to just provide some background. I'd be happy to help organize that.
Great.
We do have, I should mention, the city does have an emergency management plan that addresses all of those hazards on a pretty high level, but we do have a plan that talks about how we respond, how we plan for, and what our preparedness really is. So.
Might I interject?
Sorry, was that Mr. Ormsby who was wanting to make a comment?
Yes.
I'll recognize you for 1 minute here, Mr. Ormsby. Go ahead.
The natural hazards mitigation plan, Lake Oswego submitted a component. You might take a look at that, and especially the West Lynn component. They're forecasting a 80-foot wall of water coming down the Clackamas River, and that ain't going to dissipate at the city limits. And you got problems, and that's Clackamas River. I expect the Oswego Creek Dam, built in 1925, that is rated significant hazard. I have not seen the dam inspection reports for any of them. They should be made public before you sign any agreements for anything dealing with the Tryon Creek wastewater treatment plant project.
Thank you for those additional comments, Mr. Ormsby. So I think the Director Siegel's recommendation is, if commissioners or if the public has more comments on this, I think lining it up with, the projects that we have upcoming, like the flood overlay hazard work that we'll be doing, we can line it up with those. So I suggest members of the public or commissioners, send any comments you want into staff, and then we can, work with council and staff to prioritize them. Any other questions for citizen comment tonight? I don't see any. All right. Again, thank you, Mr. Ormsby. Thank you, commissioners, for all your comments tonight on citizen comment. Next on the agenda is Commission for Citizen Involvement. These are general updates. We do have a number of updates that we'd like to read. So please bear with me 1 second, and I'll try to read through. There's a number of neighborhood association meetings that are upcoming. So give me 1 second. I'll just try to read through all of them. So first on the list is the Evergreen Neighborhood Association. They have a new website. It's www.ena-oswego.org. So the Evergreen Neighborhood Association is pleased to announce that the ENA has a newly designed website concerning their neighborhood. They encourage all Evergreen residents to visit the website and make sure you are signed up for their newsletter. Some of the stuff that's available is the sign up tool, history of the neighborhood, links to resources, minutes, newsletters, neighborhood plan and bylaws, and then a link to the Instagram account that they have. A little bit of information from the Evergreen Neighborhood Association. And then next on the list is the Glen Morey neighborhood, Ivy Pull and Cleanup. So COVID, the Glen Morey neighborhood announced that the COVID canceled their event last year. The ice storm in February also caused problems. So it's time to bring back the Glen Morey neighborhood Ivy Pull and Cleanup. This is what the Glen Morey neighborhood is announcing. They state that this year's event will run from 2 to 4 p.m. Sunday, May 2nd, 2021, rain or shine. Neighbors usually focus on the ravine along Glen Morey Drive, along Highway 43, and anywhere else in the neighborhood that needs attention with ivy, storm debris, or litter. A socially distanced neighborhood gathering will follow at 1695 Old River Road. And for more information, the Glen Morey Neighborhood Association asks you visit www.glenmorey.wordpress.com. Again, that's www.glenmorey.wordpress.com, and you can get more information there. Next on the list is the McVeigh South Shore Neighborhood Association's general meeting. They'd like to announce that on Monday, April 26, 2021, from 7 to 8:30 p.m., there'll be the Neighborhood Association General Meeting. It'll be held via Zoom. There is a link that you can contact the Neighborhood Association for. The agenda is to elect a new chair, traffic impacts of the new rec center, the McVeigh pathway improvements, and emergency prep report. They also would like to announce that Jan Castle is stepping down as chair, but will remain as emergency prep coordinator for the near future. And if anyone is interested in serving on the board or have additional agenda items, then please let them know by sending email at McVeigh-South-Shore. That's all one word, McVeigh-South-Shore@gmail.com. And that was it for the McVeigh South Shore announcement. Palisades Neighborhood Association would like to announce that their annual general meeting will be held Thursday, April 29th, 2021 from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Zoom is limited to the first 100 signups. Part of their agenda includes voting, election on the 2021 board members, tree permits, school board information, 13 separate areas, and just helping folks understand what area they reside in, emergency prep, winter storm and spring cleanup, the rec and aquatic center, Passaic Park, what is the association, area reps needed. So they're asking folks who would like to attend to RSVP before Thursday, April 15th, 2021, 7 p.m. And there'll be online only voting. If you have any further inquiries, you can contact the Palisades Neighborhood Association and go to their website, www.palisadesneighborhood.org. So again, encourage everybody to attend the general annual meeting, and participate. Next is the Uplands Neighborhood Association. They'd like to announce their general membership meeting will be held Thursday, April 15th, 2021 from 4 to 5:30 p.m. If you need a Zoom invitation, contact Bob Irvin at Bob and Mignon, B-O-B and M-I-G-N-O-N at Comcast.net. The semi-annual update Uplands meeting will discuss what's happening in the neighborhood. There'll be a guest speaker, Dr. Laura Dela Cruz, Superintendent of the Lake Oswego School District, And there'll be action item updates, standing committees. You can volunteer as a block captain during emergency preparedness events. And those are responsible for contacting 10 to 12 surrounding neighbors. So that's the update from the Uplands Neighborhood Association. With that, that's all the general meetings that we have and announcements from the neighborhood associations that we have. Commissioners, any other comments that any commissioner would like to make, or anything that I missed? I don't see any. Move back to the agenda. So next on our agenda are the minutes. First on the agenda are the minutes from February 22nd, 2021. Commissioners, any questions, comments, change requests? None. Any motions to approve the minutes for February 22nd, 2021?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstains? Any noes? None. It's approved. Next are the minutes from March 8th, 2021. Commissioners, any comments or change requests that any commissioners have for those minutes? None. Is there a motion to approve the March 8th, 2021
I
meeting
move
minutes?
to approve.
The motion to approve and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any noes? None. Any abstains? None. All right. Next are the March 22nd, 2021 meeting minutes. Commissioners, any change requests? Comments? None.
To accept.
Vice Chair Pape makes a motion to accept the March 22nd, 2021 meeting minutes. There's a second. Second by Commissioner Leek. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any noes? None. Any abstains? None. Approved. So then we'd like to move on to our next agenda item, item number 7, other business. This is House Bills 2001 and 2003 work session number 2. It's PP 19-0008. Public comments are accepted. I think there are a couple individuals who'd like to make public comment, so I'll recognize them. 5 minutes per individual will apply. For anyone that would have liked to make comments or would like to make comments, should have sent email to Iris at imcaleb, lakeoswego.city by noon today. If you would like to make comments but hadn't emailed Iris, I would ask that you do so now if you're listening along. The Planning Commission will receive a presentation from Roseann Johnson of the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland and Tucker Merrihew of TTM Development Group, focusing on duplex and townhome development. The staff coordinator is Erik Olson, senior planner. So I'd like to turn it over to staff and lead us into the discussion, and then I'll announce when we're ready to accept public comment. So Senior Planner Olson, would you like to lead us into the discussion?
Absolutely. Good evening, Chair Heap and the rest of the commission. I just wanted to give a few brief comments before we get into the presentation that we have online for today. You'll be hearing from Roseann Johnson, again, of the Home Builders Association of Metropolitan Portland, as well as Tucker Merrihew of TTM Development Group. You may or may not also know that Tucker is also the host of a podcast about real estate development. So it's called The Real Deals. Anyway, they're here to just generally give a developer's perspective and real estate development industry perspective on middle housing with a specific focus on townhomes and duplexes. This is one of a series of sort of brief presentations that we've asked folks to come and provide to the Planning Commission, really, that are relevant to implementation of House Bill 2001 and middle housing, and hoping to get some Lake Oswego specific context as well, because Tucker and TTM Development Group also do have some experience with townhouse development in Lake Oswego. So with that being said, I'll go ahead and hand this over to Roseann to get the presentation started. And hopefully she can share her screen and that all works out, but let me know if you're having any issues and I can troubleshoot with you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Erik, for that introduction. I'd like to just say a good evening to Councillor Maboop and Chair Heap and the other commissioners on the Planning Commission tonight, as well as other staff. And Tucker, thank you for joining me in our joint presentation. So without further ado, I will share my screen. And I believe, let's see, yeah, I have that capability, right? Okay. Let's see.
Let us know if you're having issues. Iris might be able to help out.
I want to make sure I have the right one here. Okay. View to see all my tabs at the top. We'll go to present mode. Okay, so thank you again for having us tonight. Just a quick nod, everyone can see my screen. It says Lake Oswego Middle Housing.
Yes, we can see. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so this was really at the response of your staff who reached out, and I know that they've been bringing along very professional organizations to you to hear different perspectives about House Bill 2001 and 2003, but particularly 2001 and the middle housing, as it's so dubbed around the region. And so that bill, as much of this is probably a review for you, but was really intended to encourage more choices, more variety, more diversity in eventual built environment. So things like duplexes and townhomes, which is what we're going to focus on here tonight, are just two of those options. And what we really wanted to focus on, because both Tucker and myself in a past life have had experience developing as well as constructing townhomes in a fee simple environment. And so duplexes that are side by side are so similar to townhomes. So we figured we could kind of give a dual presentation on duplexes and townhomes that are horizontally attached, if you will, rather than stacked. So obviously the bill does not eliminate single dwelling development, but like I said, allows for more choices depending on your policy goals. And then obviously duplexes can, with the bill, the emphasis for duplexes was really that they would be a similar opportunity siting and design standard wise for the built environment. So wherever a single dwelling home or single family home, and I will use those terms interchangeably because some jurisdictions and policymakers use single dwelling unit, whereas others use single family housing or single family unit. But for the purpose of this discussion, I will use them interchangeably. I think it is a matter of kind of evolving discourse around terminology and what makes the most sense depending on the type of household that lives in a given structure. So middle housing and buildable lands. Around the region, HBA has really seen that on average, we will redevelop in an infill setting at approximately a 3% rate with middle housing. We've seen that in Portland with the corner attached homes or duplexes, and then moving on to the residential infill project and what is starting to be come down the pipeline with the middle housing implementation in Portland. Recently, Washington County conducted an analysis through Eco Northwest that showed on average, it would be approximately a 3% redevelopment rate in the built environment. And as Erik so aptly pointed out to me earlier today, that is accounting for the 20-year time frame moving ahead of buildable lands inventory. So notably, House Bill 2003, which I know your work session is on as well, only allows for that 3% growth rate to be applied to the assumptions that any jurisdiction or any city rather does for their housing capacity analyses, housing needs analyses, and their buildable lands inventory. So that's kind of where that 3% comes from. So in Lake Oswego, and frankly, in a lot of jurisdictions, we see that vacant lots and ones that have lower value structures on them, maybe an accessory structure that's dilapidated, or a housing structure that is just not worth nearly as much as the land that it's on. And Tucker can get into more of kind of the ratios there later. Those are really the areas that are you're going to see redevelopment for middle housing, just as you have probably seen many times, redevelopment for single dwelling or single family housing. So that being said, because the middle housing and duplexes and townhomes in particular allocate the land cost to 2 or more units, the market feasibility allows for relatively lower priced options for those houses or those dwelling units. So again, the sharing of the land costs is really what allows the units to be relatively more affordable. And we're not talking capital A affordable. That just depends on what policy goals you have and what incentives any given jurisdiction has for their capital A affordable subsidized housing. So at the end of the day, any type of middle housing will depend on who's out there that wants to live in it or that can afford to live in it. Financing really for the developer or the investors or the builder to obtain financing based on what else is out there in a nearby environment. So if you don't have any triplexes in your city, it's going to be really hard for a builder to go to a lending institution and say, hey, I want to build a triplex. Will you lend me the money to do that? They're going to say, well, show me your comps. And if there's no comps, then it's going to be, a lot harder to get that financing to actually build the structure. So there may have to be some kind of incentives in place to catalyze the first ones that you as a city might want to see. If you don't, if you're not as interested in triplexes, but you're more interested in cottage clusters, or you're more interested in some other type of middle housing that has yet to be seen in your city, there probably will need to be some sort of initial catalyst that will allow the market to realize, oh, hey, this is a desired and a valued housing type. And so then subsequently the lending institutions will, kind of get in line and say, yeah, this makes sense that we can take a risk on this. Okay, next slide. So really drilling down into the townhome and duplex options. As you've probably heard, a duplex can be 2 units attached or detached on one lot. That was an interesting phenomenon that came out. And then townhomes are, the 2 or more attached units. They have to share a wall of some sort, and they're each on their own lot. So really, when you look at an attached side-by-side duplex and a 2-unit attached townhome, start to see some striking resemblances. They pretty much look the same from the outside street view, from any corner view. No one walking down the street would be able to tell the difference between a horizontally attached duplex and an attached 2-unit townhome. But underneath is what is the difference, right? So townhomes, the owner of them owns the dirt or the land underneath and the structure, whereas duplexes, it's the one entire structure that has to be bought and sold as that entire structure, even if it's 2 dwelling units, which it is. So there enters into the equation a little bit more of a complex financing equation, right? Or sorry, a little bit more complexity to the financing because a mom and pop investor or a family that wants to get financing for the duplex and then rent out one side is probably going to have to get not double loan, but maybe 1.5 times to account for, the additional square footage that they're taking on and the risk they're taking on in terms of renting that out. Otherwise, you could have, an institutional landlord type situation, but more and more that's become less common. Usually it's someone who wants to buy the whole thing, live in one side and rent out the other. So because Lake Oswego has such high land values and currently a built environment that is predominantly single dwelling or single family, and there's such a strong desire for continued, single family units as a preference, that is leading us to believe that the 2-unit attached or detached, as the case may be, with duplexes per House Bill 2001, that those options really are going to be the most likely economically feasible, talking from a market rate or maybe a slightly subsidized perspective. So moving on to drilling down in the homeownership opportunities, really the middle housing that's new. So, any type of cottage cluster, 3-unit attached townhomes, 2-unit attached townhomes or duplexes, they're really, if they're new, they're most likely going to be developed as home ownership, like ownership opportunities, because the person that lended on them or the entity that lended on them is going to want to see their return on that investment and then move on to the next reinvestment business opportunity in your community or elsewhere. And so there are a couple ways to do that, right? You have condominiums, which are a lower priced homeownership opportunity where the investor or the developer can take their net profit and then reinvest it into the next business opportunity. Or you can also do that through townhomes, but and that's really where we see the attached type of middle housing going, because condominiums just bring up so much more risk for the builder. They have to take on a full 10-year statute of repose due to Oregon's construction defect laws, which, by the way, fall actually significantly behind other West Coast states, including California and Washington. And so that's why you see a lot less condominiums being produced in Oregon than you do in our, comparable West Coast states. So at that, I will turn it over to my colleague here, my counterpart, Tucker, and he's going to take you through a case study of some townhomes that he developed and built several years ago.
Okay, thanks for handing over. For those of you guys, if you get sick of hearing me talk, you don't have to listen to anything more than this. But if you want to hear more after this, the local show that I host is called the Portland Real Estate Podcast. And I've been the host of that for going on 6 years. I've got a co-host, and it's probably the most listened to show real estate wise in the Portland metro area. The other show I do is a national show I've had for about 8 years, and it's top 1% podcast in the world, but it's national. So you guys are probably more interested in the local version. So anyway, with that said, I've also lived in Lake Oswego for going on 20 years now. I bought my first house. Many of you guys may know which one it is if you live in the South Shore area, but on the corner of South Shore and Green Tree, there's a little white house. It used to be in much better shape when I lived there, not so much anymore, but that was 20 years ago. Since then, I've done many sides of the real estate business. I owned a mortgage company. I started TTM Development out of kind of the ashes of 2008. And since then, we've renovated and built countless homes and townhomes in Lake Oswego. Right now, our office is right on the main drag on Boones Ferry Road, right in between Goobanks and McDonald's. We're on the top floor there. And I live on Douglas Circle. So that's kind of my little bubble over here. But what you're looking at on this screen here is probably it is a very good representation of what Roseann's been talking about in terms of what the most likely option is for adoption with this, new world order, let's call it. And this was a lot prior to these 2 townhomes being on there. There was kind of a Boo Radley looking house. It was packed with crap. and it just looked like hell. And so we bought it because the dirt had now exceeded the value of the structure, which oftentimes, you know, there's varying cases of that in Lake Oswego. Sometimes the structures look fine, but the dirt value still exceeds it. That's why they get tore down. In this case, it was an obvious dirt value had exceeded the structure just based on the fact that nobody took care of it for probably better part of a decade or more. But what you'll see to the far left of your screen is another structure just across the alley from our left-hand unit. And so this is an important point because that's a larger apartment complex, and the owner of that complex doesn't seem to care about it or cares about it as much as the person who cared about the house that we bought on this property does. And they haven't done much to it. The tenants, they're not bad tenants, but it just has a very kind of not so great look from the curb. And so when we bought this property, it was zoned R2, which means we could have done 3 different things. And this is in first edition for those of you guys that don't know. You know, as you head up above D Avenue, you start to get to the R6 zoning. You stay below D Avenue, you get that R2 zoning. And so with the R2 zoning, it allows us to do multiple things. We could have built a single family here. And in hindsight, the reality is we would have made just as much money. And so that's going to be a big driver in what actually really happens in the real world here, regardless of how you guys, you know, shape this policy. But the reason why we did these townhomes is because that apartment complex that was right across the alley was not very good looking. And I thought if we built a $1.1 million new construction home here, we might have a hard time selling it. Now, bear in mind, this was 2017, I think, Roseann. I don't remember when we built these to be exact, but I think it was about 2017. And so the market was warm, but it wasn't crazy bananas hot like it is today, where as long as, you know, it's got a front door and windows that work, you sell it. So we actually were building it with a little bit of thought process. And I thought this would be the best product for that lot, given kind of some of the other challenges that were around it that we could not affect. And so that really is what pushed us towards doing multiple units, not just because we could, because if you looked at the math on this, you know, we would have made just as much money doing a single family. So that aside, what we did build were 2 units. We had a shared wall down the middle. And this is my favorite way to build them because you basically separate your master bedrooms. You put one on one wing of the structure. So one's on the far right side, one's on the far left side. And we use a bunch of sound deafening insulation in the walls in between. And we have to put up, you know, additional firewalls and things like that. But it makes it seem as much as you can like you're living in a single family home, but it's an attached home. We also changed the look of each side. So it didn't have your traditional kind of duplex, you know, renter look, right? We wanted people to feel like it was their own home and they could have some pride of ownership. And since then, you know, these have aged very well and the people that have owned them have taken great care of them. Now, that brings me to my next point, who bought them, right? So this was kind of, when we built these, there weren't many townhomes getting built. And to be honest, there's been very few built since this. Renaissance has done a couple of different townhome projects, one in first edition, about a half block down from this, and another one off Pilkington and Childs. And so who bought these is likely the same people. Well, I know who bought a couple of their units, but who bought these is basically the same avatar or avatars of who's going to buy future townhomes and who bought Renaissances. So the left side is a young professional. So the lighter colored one that you're looking at there, a younger couple, married, no kids. They got a couple cats. Husband travels around. They're, you know, probably late 30s, mid 30s, pre-kids era, right? But young professional. And they were able to buy in here. We sold that unit for about $800,000. So at the time, single family new construction was going for about 1.1 million. We were able to offer this to the market at $800,000. The right side was bought by a woman who lived in Dunthorpe, but she wanted to be able to have a downsize house, we'll call it, or in this case, townhome that she could move to that was walkable, that was closer to downtown Lake Oswego. And so she bought it with the intention of downsizing. And so those are your main 2 buyer types for these housing types. You know, moving forward, regardless of how many get built, that's going to be who buys most of them. You've got a lot of people that have kind of aged in place, either on or around the lake, and they're ready to downsize from the 4,000 square foot house or 4,000 plus to a 2,000, 2,200 square foot condo or townhome. And that's just kind of what they want to do. The challenge, however, is setting these up with a master on the main for that type of buyer, because a lot of those buyers want to eliminate stairs. So that's the challenging part. If you can do that, those get bought like that. The other buyer is kind of a replenishing pool, but there's not quite as many of them because due to the price points in Lake Oswego, they have to be fairly successful young professional types to be able to even buy in without rolling equity from a previous sale or something like that. So this project was a success in terms of, I think, what we were able to do for the neighborhood. We did have quite a bit of neighbor pushback, just like we do with virtually every project. People were not happy about the fact that we were doing multiple units here. But at the end of the day, I think once it was done, I don't think anybody's really complaining about it anymore. And I think they actually like it. It tends to be the case with virtually every construction project in an infill environment. So that's what we've got here. Going through the numbers, you know, I think the reality is that townhomes without some sort of subsidy or some sort of, you know, waiving of SDCs or building permit costs, it's going to be really challenging to even have builders build them when there's the option of doing a single family. Because I wanted to break down some numbers for you here, because I was just doing some chicken scratches as Roseann was talking, because I wanted to really kind of show you guys the reality of the situation, which is, you know, if we were to buy, let's say, a lot just like this again in first edition, just to make it simple. Right now, first edition, new construction, believe it or not, for those of you that have looked, is selling somewhere between $1.8 and $2 million. You know, when we first started building in there, we thought $1 million was going to be the top end, and anything over that was crazy. Well, that was 2015, and here we are in 2021, and there's builders in there that have multiple pending at about $2 million. And for that $2 million, they're building 3,500 square foot houses, which generally means there's a basement included, because with the design restrictions in first edition, it's hard to get over about 3,000 without going down and putting a basement in, unless you have an oversized lot. But if you've got your standard 6,000 square foot lot, it's difficult to do that. So let's say you're building a 3,500 square foot house. They're in first edition. Right now, building costs just on the average for, you know, a heavily platted lot that doesn't need tons of excavation is going to be around $200 a foot, right? So a 3,500 square foot house is going to cost you about $700,000 to build. Now, it's worth about $1.8 to $2 million on the retail market. Now, who knows what you bought land for? It's an X factor here, but it doesn't matter. As long as it's a constant, you pay the same for whether you're doing a single family or doing townhomes. So let's say right now, lots, just for argument's sake, they're going for about 600, 650,000 in first edition. You know, if somebody's listing it on market, paying real estate commissions, I think the most recent one sold for 650, which is the high water mark for the neighborhood. If you're building a house for 700,000, you're building for 650, you've got 1.35 is your cost all in. The builder has about a $500,000 margin minus carry costs, minus selling costs, if they're going to sell. It's a good model right now. That's why guys are doing it if they can find the lots. Now, let's look at it from if we could build townhomes anywhere, right? Or we could build multiple units anywhere, would we? And it gets diminishing as you add more units, by the way. So it becomes less desirable based on the math. So if you're going to build 2 townhomes at 2,200 square feet each, which is going to be probably maxed out, like the max square footage you could get, because with these townhomes right here, we're just over 2,000. And we asked for a variance to expand the footprint on the rear of each townhome by 2 feet. And the neighborhood association shot us down. So we maxed out the square footage that we could build without a variance, and we got about 2,000. But let's say you could get 2,200, just for argument's sake, for each unit. It costs you $200 a square foot to build, about the same. You're not really upping the features are about the same. It's just the style of housing that's different. And so that's going to mean per unit, it's going to cost you about $440,000 to build each unit. You multiply that by 2, because there's 2 of them, it's $880,000, or give or take 900 grand. So that 900 grand is what your all in construction costs are. If you're paying $650 for the dirt, that puts you at $1,550,000. And I think best case right now, based on, you know, what has sold in there, you're probably at like a $995 price point for 2,000 square feet to sell these out at, which puts you at $2 million. So at $2 million, you're grossing the same gross dollars, right? You're selling it somewhere around $2 million as you would with a single family. But your construction costs are about $200,000 more, maybe $150,000 more. Plus you've got 2 sets of real estate commissions. Plus you got 2 warranties to deal with if you're selling them fee simple. So as you can see, and I'm not trying to deter everyone from saying this can't happen, but I'm saying there is a sliver of the market where this is going to happen. Overall, the math just doesn't make sense. We can all have great intentions and we can say, do this all day long, but builders like myself are not going to do it because we're going to look at it and go, well, yeah, we could add density, but does it make sense financially to add density? And usually the answer is yes. But in Lake Oswego, with the way prices are right now and the way rents are and how you value things, the answer is often no. So I think that's an important point to put out there. Nobody's probably looked at that or thought about it, which is why I wanted to bring it up while you guys have me on here tonight. But overall, my opinion is this is the best type of density if we're going to do it. I think this is the type that accomplishes some type of middle housing. I know it seems, a little ridiculous to think middle housing is $1 million, but the reality is that land costs and construction costs and permit costs are just too much unless you're going to get some major subsidies to build anything that's less than that. So that's my take on this. I think other than that, I'll hand it back to you, Roseann. So you can finish unless you guys have.
Thanks. I actually had one more slide, which, just kind of gave some other pointers when you covered a lot of them. And I guess, Tucker, a question I had for you, just to do a little bit of, between two ferns action here, but what kind of, would you have built them if they were a duplex? If that lot, you were like, oh, would I build something to sell to one person that might rent out the other side? Did that enter your mind at all when you were looking at that property?
It did. And we could have done an attached triplex there as well. So I ran through the valuation model on all 3 of those and it diminished from that fee simple townhome. It got worse and worse and worse. So we could have built one single family and probably profited slightly more if we built a duplex and sold that duplex to whether it be an owner occupant on one side and they rent the other, or it's just somebody looking to purchase an investment property and rent them both out. That value would be lower yet. And if we did a triplex, it might be slightly higher, but we're selling to purely an investor at that point. We're not selling into emotion, we're selling into math. And whenever you sell into math and not of emotion, you're selling for less dollars, generally speaking. It becomes a commercial real estate transaction or multi-family real estate transaction and not a single family transaction. So yes, I did the kind of price analysis and the cost benefit analysis for work rendered and profits that you could generate. And at the end of the day, we could have made slightly more building a single family there and selling it. But I thought that the multifamily townhomes or the 2 townhomes was the best product for the lot. And ultimately, I think it was the best product for the neighborhood in that exact location.
Okay, talk to me a little bit about attached versus detached. Did you think about, a slightly smaller footprint per unit, but they would have basically their own smaller single family detached unit?
I don't think we even had the option of doing that based on code. Yeah, so this was that's as far as I got. If that was in the code, I missed it, but I don't know that we would have.
I think that's one thing for any planning commission, like Oswego Planning Commission to consider is when you're looking at your zoning and any kind of amendments you want to make with staff is or recommend to the council is do we want to recommend that there's a little bit more, flexibility to do detached versus attached town fee simple options, right? So obviously a duplex that would be detached would have to be condominiumized, right? And that would get you a little bit lower price point because the land would be held in common ownership. But those are, oftentimes when a market slumps, those are the first units to decrease in value, and they're the last units to come back up in value. And so, it is just something to consider, what you are incentivizing. What about parking, Tucker?
I will say condos are tough. I'm the president of an HOA for a 4-unit condominium complex in Johns Landing, just by virtue of the fact that I'm the longest tenured owner at I think I'm up to 17 years now. And it's a pain in the butt in comparison because you've got these small complexes and you've got some changeover in ownership and you inevitably always have one person that doesn't pay. It just becomes very challenging. But the positive is on a builder side is that you can get those done a lot quicker, right? By doing these townhomes, it was a much more elongated process because we had to go through a full lot partition, even though they're attached. And that was 15-month process. So, that's why builders are going to look at this and go, okay, do we want to go through a 15-month process to build multiple units? I don't know. Let's look at the math and see if it's worth it, right? And if it's not worth it, okay, well, then let's look at what a duplex is worth. Let's look at what a triplex is worth. Well, if it's really not worth as much as a nice new single family, then why would we do it, right? So I think it's important to just look at the math, because the math is going to drive what happens here. It has nothing to do with anything other than that. Because the mom and pop person that, is rarely going to be the people actually building these units. It's going to be the builders. It's going to be the developers. It's going to be the professionals, because it's a big undertaking for any mom and pop type person to take this on. And if they do, it's a one-off situation and it's not going to go at scale. There's just no way it's going to happen.
Thanks. And then, I remember when we were prepping for this presentation, you mentioned kind of the 75-25 rule. You want to walk through the Planning Commission, and then we're happy to take questions after that.
For sure. And I was looking at the numbers, and I think that it holds in some cases, not in others. Right now, so like at the time that we sold these townhomes that, we used as the example tonight, we sold them for about 75% of what a single family was selling for. So that was, I think a closer gap than what it would be now for the same square footage. Because there's another one that's pending right now. Many of you guys may have seen right across from the post office that JT Smith built. It's pending at 1.4 million, which puts it at about the 75% of what new construction is selling for. But if you look a little closer, they stacked those units three stories tall, and they got about 3,400 square feet. Plus they have like some additional square footage above the garages and back, I believe. So they're really high on square footage, much higher than what your standard townhome is going to be. So I think the deviance between, or the delta between what single family sells for and what a townhome sells for, it's actually going to be wider than 75% now. So keep that in mind moving forward.
That's really helpful. All right. Well, thank you for your time, Planning Commission members and Chair. Do you have any questions for either Tucker or myself? We're happy to, yeah.
Sure, thanks. Commissioners, any questions for Ms. Johnson or Mr. Merrihew?
Looks like Philip had a question.
Philip, Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks you both for your presentation. It was very, very informational. I had a question about townhome development and construction was really prolific 2006, 2007, and then the market sort of the market fell out 2008. Why do you think the popularity in those has not come back, and what was it about in 2006, 2007? Why was townhome development and construction, you think, a little bit more successful than maybe it is now?
Well, I'll tell you, first off, we had compressed prices in comparison. So, you build townhomes when you have a compressed price environment, right? Or compressed price market. It's a little cheaper housing. Now, construction costs are astronomically more expensive, but remember, there was a lot of easy money back then too, right? So the aspiring real estate developer, I was in the game back then. I could have gone and got millions of dollars way easier than I could get today. So you got a lot greener, newer, just, ready to get after it developers who were building anything they could get their hands on that allowed, zoning wise, that would allow for it. So I think money, financing is a big thing. But if you're speaking locally to Lake Oswego, there's only so much dirt you can even build townhomes on. So it's not like there ever would have been this huge bumper crop of townhomes that happened. They happen more out in like Beaverton, Tigard, Clackamas, maybe some in Milwaukee, where there was just more dirt that was available for that type of zoning. We have a list here in our office of every single property in Lake Oswego that we could actually build townhomes on. And I can count them on two hands, at this point. So it's not like, I guess to answer your question, it's a variety of factors, but I don't think it really, regardless of what the answer is, I don't think it applies to Lake Oswego right now.
Commissioner Fisher, and then I'll get to Commissioner Leak next. Commissioner Fisher.
Yes, Mr. Merrihew, are there any incentives that would encourage a builder to build more like triplexes or multifamily housing? And if so, what are those incentives as a builder that you would look for? What should the city be doing to incentivize you to build more?
It's a tough question because values have gotten so large, the incentives have to match that, right, in order for it to make an impact. You know, the easy answer would be okay, let's waive STCs, let's waive the tear down tax, let's do things that, you know, can move the needle to some extent cost wise. But whatever it is, it'd have to move the needle cost wise, because otherwise you just can't make a big enough dent to make the math work, you know, on a larger scale. So I guess to answer your question, and it's a good one, you know, whatever can be done to really lower the cost of development as much as possible if you're building that type of housing. That's really the only way that I think you can help to, you know, lower your SDCs by $2,000 or lower your building permit costs by $5,000, or, you know, maybe, you know, there's some incentive for the tear down tax if you do some, you know, version of the tear down that's, you know, I don't think it's hand demo, but recycle materials, whatever. I mean, that's a minuscule amount. It really won't even make a dent, right? So it has to be a big swack. It has to be something that makes us go, huh, it's a big enough chunk of money that, you know, we know these products will be absorbed the moment they hit the market because there's just none of them, right? So if we can build them and they make sense at all, we'll build them. But again, it's got to be a big enough chunk that the math makes sense.
Thank you.
I think
Commissioner Lee. Oh, sorry.
on that,
Ms. Johnson, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think, you know, kind of underlying what Tucker is trying to say is that, you know, for each additional unit that you build, you have to put a kitchen in, right? You have to have at least 1 or 2, 3 bathrooms. You know, you're gonna have your laundry room, right? It's like all these plumbing fixtures, rough-in plumbing, and then the finished plumbing fixtures and the level of the finish, you know, and like Oswego, it tends to be on the higher side, right? So because you have, you know, the kitchen costs times 3 for a triplex, the bathroom costs times 6 or times 9 for a triplex, the laundry room costs times 9, right? All those things are like high value items that you don't get as much comparative advantage or economies of scale when you're doing it just one house and you only have to put in 1 kitchen, right? Or, you know, you just have the 3 bathrooms. And so your price per square foot is just so much higher when you're building, you know, 3 smaller units, even though you think, oh, well, they're going to be less expensive. Yes, like relatively they are less expensive, but price per square foot wise, they're actually higher.
Yeah, it's a good point, Roseann. And those townhomes that we built, I mean, the kitchens, because everybody's got a kitchen, right? And everybody wants a bigger kitchen. The kitchens we put in those townhomes were probably 80% of the size of a normal single family kitchen, right? So, you know, it's like building almost 2 kitchens, right? Cost wise, because cabinets and countertops and fixtures. I mean, if any of you guys done a home remodel, your kitchen and your baths are your most expensive things. If you want to give yourself a heart attack, go get a bid on a new kitchen and new bathrooms, right? So there's a big multiplier of those when you start doing multiple units, and that's why it drives the cost up and it makes the math more difficult quickly.
Yeah, so I mean, like, if I had my ideal druthers, there would be some kind of grant program or, you know, subsidy program to make like all the kitchens and the bathrooms and those expensive things that have to go per unit to make it a dwelling unit, right? Legally, make those like half the cost, right? That would get you quite a ways there. But like Tucker's saying, they're 80% of one. They're 0.8 to 1 versus, you know, a 0.5 to 1, which would really start driving your costs down to construct. And then you could actually see the math working on creating the additional units. So, but you know, that's kind of my utopia.
Thank you. Commissioner Leak, you had a question?
Yeah, Tucker, you build a very upscale product. I think middle housing, Salem's idea of middle housing was more economical than what you're building in first edition. And I know as a realtor, the weekly listing price of a home in 97035 last week was $859,000. And in 034, it was $1.4 million. That's the average or listing prices. So what is middle housing in Lake Oswego? Is middle housing then $1 million? Or is middle housing, I think, as perceived by the legislature, was, well, if you're a fireman, you should be able to afford a $500,000 house. So where can we build that in Lake Oswego, it seems to me, is not first edition. But
It's
in the
not,
fringe,
but the challenge is that, and to answer your question, middle housing. So within my business model, you're right. We build some very high-end homes, but for us, middle housing is all the renovation projects that we do, because we can take existing construction and we can make it like new, and we can put it out to the market for $600,000 to $700,000, which, you know, is expensive in some parts of town, but in Lake Oswego, it's not, for a turnkey, virtually brand new product. So for us, that's our middle housing. That's what we do for the community, is that if it shouldn't be torn down because there's some value left in the house and the house has some appeal that can be brought back, we renovate it, we put it back to the world. And that's the middle housing, because that's a lot cheaper, honestly, than building new middle housing in a lot of cases. So,
but you're taking a lot that could be split in two and put two smaller homes on it. It's just quicker turn and easier to do, to take the existing structure and renovate it.
but we would not be able to meet, even if we took down the structure in a lesser dirt value neighborhood than first edition, we still would not be, it would be very difficult to put those new units to market less than the single family existing home that we're renovating because of the cost. It would be very difficult to do that.
It would each be 600, you'd get two instead of one, I guess is where I'm going. Isn't that possible?
It's possible, but again, it just depends on neighborhood by neighborhood. You got to do the math. And, you know, in like I said, in first edition, lots are selling for $650. The cheapest you're going to find lots in Lake Oswego right now is probably $375. So those are probably a little more opportunity, but even then you got to do the math. And I did the math, and they're not, it just depends on what that end unit is worth, that fee simple unit. Because that's the best case scenario for a builder. You know, as you go to an attached duplex, it goes down a little further. So it just depends. But you know, you're bracketed between 375 on the low end for, I'll even say 385 now. I think it's probably gone to that. There's a couple lots that are for sale. We'll see where they post at, but as long as it's not bordering a crazy busy road, or it has some sort of functional obsolescence that we can't fix, it's selling in the upper threes. And, you know, that's just the reality of it. But I think there are certain properties, you're right, that do lend themselves to this for sure. And when they're there, it'd be nice to be able to take advantage of those and create that product for those. But, you know, again, for us, like, let's say there's a ranch that we're renovating on Green Tree Circle, Palisades neighborhood, right? You know, if we tore that down and put another house there or two units there, we could do that. But then we're just tearing down a house for the sake of tearing it down to create more units, when there's a good house there that we can renovate and put back to market, and the neighbors actually like us instead of hate us. Because, by the way, I got death threats when I built those townhomes. So that's a reality of our business as well. So people don't like it. And so I'm okay being a punching bag, but only 4 out of 5 days a week, you know, so.
Wow.
So Commissioner Lake, I just wanted to follow up, because you bring up a really great, almost philosophical question. What is middle housing, right? You know, what did the state intend it to be, and versus what is your obligation as a local jurisdiction to come into compliance with it? And that's not for Tucker or for HBA to tell you. And my kids are going crazy now. But, you know, so that's for you guys to, you know, to work out and grapple with, you know, what do you want to do incentive wise? What do you want to, you know, where do you want to encourage these units, knowing kind of what you know from economical perspective, like the finances of it, just the raw numbers, as well as like the I guess, goodwill and good faith effort that, you know, each jurisdiction is finding themselves having to be in to comply with the middle housing bill. So I don't think there's any right or wrong answers. It's just, obviously we decided to go with these 2-unit attached kind of focus on in this presentation, because the duplexes are what is, at the end of the day, that's, you have to allow those on any single family zone lot that allows for single dwellings. So if they can be a home ownership project or product, then it's a little bit more financially feasible is what we're saying.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any other questions? I'd like to open it up for public comment at this time. I think we did have a couple people that wish to provide a public comment. Iris, would you like to let us know who would like to provide public comment? If staff has any other comments for opening up the public comment session?
I'll move Carol Ockert over.
Okay.
I guess I would just say thank you to both Roseann and Tucker for joining us tonight and for helping answer some questions from the Planning Commission. It's really a different perspective, I think, than what we discuss a lot of times in the Planning Commission. Definitely interesting to hear, from you two, and appreciate the addition today.
Yeah, thank you. It was very insightful. Yes, thanks.
Well, I want to thank Eric and actually Scott Siegel, your planning director, for reaching out to HBA and for giving us the opportunity to come. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we can do this again sometime. So do you want us to stay on for public comment, or are we being released?
Yeah, it's up to you. You're welcome to stay, but I know many have activities and kids and such, so feel free to leave or stay. Yes.
I just didn't know if it was going to be like a conversation type thing. So I will mute.
All right.
All right, and to Ms. Ockert and others who are testifying, Evan Boone here, I'll go ahead and time for the 5 minutes. I'll give you an oral warning at 1 minute. And of course, any testimony given tonight doesn't go to the public hearing. So it's to advise the commission as to issues that you should be considering as you kind of work through the development of code language. But ultimately, there'll be a public hearing in which the official testimony is to be brought back.
Thank you, Attorney Boone.
Well, and also just to add that there's going to be an entire community planning process for attaining compliance with HB 2001. So there's a lot of work ahead of us, and I think Eric can talk more about that when we get to the schedule update. So I didn't want to take up any more of Carol's time. So I haven't taken any of your time. It's now your turn, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Director Siegel. Ms. Ockert, if you'd like to state your name and address and the organization that you represent.
Hi, this is Carol Ockert. I live at 910 Cumberland Road in Fan Forest Hills, and I'm the chair of the Neighborhood Chairs Commission. I'm also the land use liaison for Fan Forest Hills. And I've been doing land use in our neighborhood for well over a decade. And I have a story to tell you that's quite different than the one that Tucker has put before you. And for my story, I'm going to actually tell you that you can look to city staff to gather data to, I would say, make it very clear that the story I'm going to tell you is a factual story. In fact, First Edition was heavily participating in writing the code that created duplexes in our neighborhood. And over the last 10 years, the R2 area, and as Tucker rightly said, those R2 lots could either have been developed as a 6,000 square foot whole as a single family, or split and have a duplex arrangement on them. Almost every single one, with the exception, I can only think of one house that developed a single family. Time after time after time, they developed not as he said, but they developed as duplexes. And they developed as duplexes with the full support of the neighborhood, the full support of the neighborhood. We wrote the code, we wanted the duplexes, and in fact, that is what we're getting. We have gotten them time and again. If the developer were going to make more money developing with a single family home, the developer absolutely would have. I can tell you that a lovely duplex, and they are lovely homes that are being built on those lots, has just finished on the corner of 4th and C. And that particular one half of it, I have it on Zillow next to me here, one half of it sold for 1.09 million, and the other half on the street side sold for 1.25 million. They could have done a single family there if they'd wanted. They didn't want to. There was more money to be made with the duplex. If you go along 3rd, it's the same story. There was a duplex that just finished being built, 1.4 million. Another one across the street, 1.6 on one side, 1.02 on the other. I've got Zillow next to me. So that's what's happening for redevelopment in that particular area. If it was capable of being split, it was split. And it's split with the blessing of the neighborhood association. In fact, the one that Tucker showed you on D, the neighborhood association absolutely did not oppose him building a townhome, a duplex there. What we opposed was that he asked for a blanket variance on the lot. And in fact, it was not the neighborhood association that shot him down. It was a 7-0 decision by a group such as yourself, the DRC, who decided against what he wanted to do. So I'm here to tell you that when a lot has the opportunity to split in my neighborhood in Fan Forest Hills, it does. We are seeing that that's certainly the case with the larger lots in Forest Hills, where we have a number of 20,000 square foot lots that are splitting into 10,000 square foot lots. So for the most common is that is what developers are doing, is that they are developing to the place where it's the highest density on the lot because it's the most profit for them. Again, there's the occasional sort of outlier on that. So I have a long history of seeing this, participating in it and supporting it. And I hope that if you have some questions about my neighborhood, you'll ask, and again, turn to staff. They can provide you with the data that shows you how many of those R2 lots developed as duplexes. And you'll find, in fact, the absolute majority of them have. Again, if there's anything that I can help you understand with regard to the neighborhood, I certainly will. I have been watching the HB 2001 hearings as they happened last year. I've been following HB 2001 for the Neighborhood Chairs Committee. And so I will continue, and I appreciate you guys working on this particular project. I thought that the staff report that Erik provided to you this evening was very useful. He put some very good practical information in there for you on townhomes and the city. And so I'm glad that you're really getting to the meat of the code and starting to look at what's going to drive development in Lake Oswego, what to expect from it. And certainly in my neighborhood, as duplexes under HB 2001 are allowed on every lot. My question is—
Commissioner, or sorry, Ms. Okert, time has been reached. Do you need another minute? I'll recognize you for another minute.
I can just wrap it up and say my curiosity at the moment is that the R6 lots, which are now in effect R2 lots, I wonder what will develop, whether we will continue to get any single family or whether they will all be the duplex style that we've been seeing in R2. That would be my guess, because again, that's where the most money is coming out of those lots. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. I think we do have questions. Commissioner Leek, you had a question?
Yes, you talked about the 20,000 square foot lots divided into 10,000 square foot lots. Those weren't duplexes though. Those were single family, correct?
Absolutely, yes.
So it's only in the higher density areas that you're getting the duplexes put in.
That's the only place it's allowed. You wouldn't be allowed it on an R10 lot at the moment.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Commissioners, any other questions? Commissioner Stewart, did you have a question or comment?
No, that was just my thinking pose. Sorry.
Oh, all right. Anyone else that would like to ask a question to Ms. Okert? I see none. Thank you, though. Commissioner Leek, I think you have another question.
I have one more question. Again, the prices that you're saying the duplex lots are coming in at as a finished product, they're well over $1 million.
Yes, they are.
So that's, again, the question, the seminal question for the whole issue is, what is middle housing in Lake Oswego? How do you define that? And certainly $1 million is not going to be purchased by somebody who's working in the fire department. Just saying.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Leek. No other questions? Thank you, Ms. Okert. It was a very good testimony. We appreciate you coming out and talking to the commission tonight. Thank you. Or comment, I should say. Thank you for all your comments. All right. Iris, we'd like to move to the next person who would like to make a public comment tonight.
Okay, Karen Ingalls, I'll move her over.
Sure. Looks like we can see Ms. Ingalls. Ms. Ingalls, if you'd like to unmute and then give your name and address for the record, please do so.
Hello, am I there?
Yes, we can hear you, Ms. Ingalls. If you'd like to give your name and address for the record, then go ahead.
I just wanted to say I really enjoyed listening to everything. I'm learning a lot, but I didn't really have comments ready. But thank you for making this available.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. From the Forest Highlands neighborhood.
Thank you for listening in tonight. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Yes. Iris, did we have anybody else that would like to make a comment?
That's it. Thank you.
All right. Seeing that we have no other comments, I'd like to close the public comment section for this now. So the public comment section is now closed. Is there any final thoughts that staff would like to give or any final questions that commissioners would like to ask? Otherwise, we'll move on to the next agenda topic. Commissioner Stewart.
Yeah, I do have one observation, just kind of something for us all to think about as we're wrapping up here. We've talked a lot about, the townhome scenario, which of course is the for sale product. The development is subdivided onto lots and it's sold to a buyer. But what we haven't talked a lot about tonight is the duplex model, which is one lot, one owner, and it's subdivided and they're for rent. So in this idea of, what is middle housing for Lake Oswego, it's something that's what we also have to think about, because, the duplex scenario perhaps becomes a little bit more of an affordable scenario. Now, granted, it's not something that multiple people buy. You rent them, but it is what else is on the table. And frankly, there's a lot more opportunity for duplexes to occur because they're in effect being proposed to, exist on single family lots. So anyway, just food for thought.
Thank you, Commissioner Stewart. I would mention that I believe we did hear about them tonight, but what I heard from the Builders Association was that they weren't very feasible, that there was, just the way the Oregon construction law was set up. It seemed like the Home Builders Association and the comments that we received tonight said that, they weren't really something that was desirable from a builder's perspective. But I agree with your comments. It seems like there should be opportunity. It just seems like maybe at the state level, they may need to, make it more appealing from addressing some of the builders' concerns. Commissioner Leek.
I thought it was the condominiumizing that was a stumbling block for the developers because they have a 10-year liability factor that increases their exposure that they don't like, but not duplexes.
Okay, yeah, I stand corrected. Sorry, I think you're right. It was the condominiums. Yes.
I guess my not opposition, but my thoughts on a duplex are if we're supposed to incorporate housing for people who work in Lake Oswego, an investor buys a duplex and rents out both sides, it preempts someone from getting a toehold of home ownership. And if we're going to have middle housing, all affordable middle housing like that is going to get scooped up by investors to rent out. They won't be home ownership opportunities unless we put some kind of a caveat that says for the first 2 weeks that the home is finished and on the market, it has to, the seller has to entertain home ownership opportunities like HUD does on houses that are repossessed. And a builder is not going to like that either. I guess I'm chasing my tail, running around trying to figure out how we provide affordable housing, middle housing to people who work at normal jobs without it.
Thank you, Commissioner Leek. Commissioner Fisher, I'm sorry, I know you wanted to make a comment.
Well, it's following Commissioner Leek. Like, what is middle? I mean, if somebody buys $1 million duplex, what are they going to have to rent it for? And certainly the firefighter or the police officer is not going to be in that market. So I think you've raised some really interesting problems here.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Commissioner Stewart?
Just real quick, I mean, to answer the question, what I'm hearing is the land cost is really driving everything, right? The cost of land is what makes ultimately, a house, affordable or not. A lot of cases, if you're looking at it from a development scenario.
Absolutely.
Commissioner Fisher.
I agree that land is important, but Mr. Merrihew pointed out that it was $200 a square foot. And that's not chump change either. So there are a lot of things driving the price. It's not just the land, it's also the construction costs. So a place in Lake Oswego is going to be really an interesting conundrum here.
Thank you. Vice Chair Pepe.
This question goes to staff primarily. Eric, have there been any ideas brought forth from at the state level on providing incentives and providing financial resources to cities, communities, so that they can provide specific incentives? Maybe not the exact ones that were brought up today by either of the guest speakers, but in other ways.
Yeah, there has been conversation about that at the state level. A lot of that has occurred around House Bill 2003 and housing production strategies. So this sort of overarching, how are we going to produce housing as a city type of conversation. I think there really is a huge toolbox that the state has put out there with a lot of different approaches to increasing housing production. They're not all necessarily specific to middle housing, but obviously that's kind of the House Bill 2001 component that we're really focusing on primarily. But yeah, there was definitely consideration of incentives, and I think depending on the path that the city goes down, there are ultimately the city needs to make a finding to the state that what we're adopting is compliant with the state's minimum requirements, or that there's no unreasonable cost or delay, essentially that our alternative standards could be putting on a development. So if there is a particular desire, to sort of balance out some of this, there could be, the planning commission could say, we're going to limit this, but we want to incentivize it in this other area, and maybe that balances out for, no longer there's an unreasonable cost or delay. I think that's just a really It's a very specific sort of circumstance, though, I would say. I'm not sure that a lot of cities are really thinking too much about incentives when they're talking about specific just House Bill 2001. I think a lot of people are just kind of wanting to make sure their code is in check. And other cities have sort of started other processes earlier than House Bill 2001 that were interested in middle housing, sort of prior to it being a mandate from the state. So anyway, there's a lot of sort of opportunity to utilize middle housing, or I'm sorry, incentives for middle housing, and I think there's a lot of ability for that to be woven into an argument that we make to the state, essentially about our sort of adopted regulations and how they comply.
So thank you. Following up on that, are there same conversations happening for incentives to go directly to developers?
That, I think, is more specific to affordable housing, not specific to just market rate, townhouse or duplex type development. So it's more about other ways that cities could incentivize their development through really what we understand to be the realm of what the city has the capability of regulating, which is siting design primarily, which we discussed before. So when it comes to siting and design, there's only so much that the city can do for incentives. It's less sort of financially based typically.
Right. No, not the city giving the incentive at the state level. If someone were to come into Lake Oswego and want to build a duplex or a townhome and whatnot, can they apply? Is there any conversations or any activity around having them apply directly to the state to maybe offset the demolition costs or the splitting of the lots, so on and so forth?
Not that I'm aware of necessarily. Not from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pavey. I see staff would like to make a comment. Attorney Boone and Director Siegel. Attorney Boone, would you like to go first?
Well, no, I think I saw Scott wanted to make a comment, and
Okay.
I assume it's around the type of housing that we're talking about here and the criteria for it.
Sure, Director Siegel.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Heap. I heard a few comments from the commissioners about, well, what is middle housing for Lake Oswego? And then you talked a little bit about what I would call housing tenure, the arrangement or the agreement that, the occupant or the resident has with the property owner or with the lender if it's, a mortgage. And so, it's outside the scope of the bill and really the Planning Commission and even the City Council's purview to regulate, the tenure or whether housing is rental housing or if it's housing that may be owner occupied or that is fee simple that you can purchase. But I think that this conversation about incentives, it may open up some I don't know that it will really enable affordable housing or more affordable housing to develop, but it could be part of the sort of the capital packaging of capital that affordable housing developers must come up with in order to produce below market rate housing. So, for example, the city does offer system development charge waivers and development review fee waivers for housing that meets affordability criteria. Currently, those criteria, the way that the city has defined that is that it must be multifamily housing in a development of 20 or more units. So it was really envisioned to be for rental housing, multiple family rental housing. It wasn't anticipated to be used for middle housing. So if that were, something that the planning committee or the city council and the planning commission wanted to encourage, that, look, we're seeing a lot of duplexes built here that are selling for $1 million. They're not, it's not rental housing. If, that was something that the city wanted to encourage, for that to be rental housing at a lower rate, at or below the area median income, we would have to adopt different tools to do that. And I think I see the language in House Bill 2001 in the administrative rule encouraging local governments to look at incentives. It's not mandating that we adopt any, but I think there is a provision in there, and Eric could probably tell us more, more about it, that says that we must actually demonstrate that we've considered these other alternatives, these incentives, when we're proposing code amendments. So I think there's some language in the bill or in the administrative rules that point us in the direction. We do have some tools on the books already that could help maybe incentivize middle housing that's more attainable for lower or moderate income households, families. And and then it's a question of whether or not the market will deliver it. We heard from one developer this evening who said for their particular market or the products that they build, it's not yet feasible. But there may be others out there who are looking at it, and we're happy to investigate that. If there are other builders or other types of housing that you'd like to learn more about, we can try to put together some guest speakers on that. And that's all I had to say. I don't know if I covered the item that Mr. Boone wanted to discuss.
Commissioners, any final comments, questions? Otherwise, we'll wrap it up. Commissioner Fisher.
Scott, is this something the commission should direct to the city council, that we want them to start considering incentives? Or is that something that's not our purview? I mean, what?
I think I'll defer to Erik when we get further into the policy discussion, or I guess the opportunities analysis and report that will be presented, that the consultants and Erik will be presenting in May. Perhaps that might be one of the opportunities that's identified, or at least that would be a good time to discuss it, I would think. But I'll defer to Erik on that.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, that's absolutely right. We'll be really diving a lot more into what our options are overall. And I think, while it might be helpful to sort of get an initial message out to City Council about what, we prefer, or what the Planning Commission rather would prefer, and what sort of our recommendations are. I think it might make sense to have these conversations with Cascadia and sort of hear a little bit more about the sort of total package of recommendations, and maybe we can include it in a larger package. But it's certainly, I defer to the Planning Commission on the best strategy to convey that preference, but it's definitely something that can be recommended.
Commissioner Fisher, yes.
Just to follow up, is Cascadia going to be considering that? Okay, then we should probably wait to see what they're saying.
Yeah, I agree. That's what I was going to say too, Commissioner Fisher. It sounds like, once we hear from Cascadia, we can maybe incorporate some of that feedback then. So waiting until we hear that's probably advisable. Any other final comments? None. I'd like to conclude this agenda item, the work session on House Bills 2001 and 2003. So thanks to our guest speakers, Ms. Johnson, and the other guest speaker we had tonight. Thank you for attending. Next, I'd like to move on to the other agenda item, other business. I don't think there was any other business that we had. Director Siegel, anything else for other business, or we'll move on to schedule review?
No other business from staff.
All right, schedule review?
Yeah, on the schedule update, your next meeting is April 26th, and we have Erica Rooney, the city engineer, scheduled to meet with you and to present on infrastructure considerations around middle housing. We also have a public hearing scheduled on the sunset provision of the short-term rental ordinance. This is the expiration date on that ordinance, which I believe is July 16th. It's middle of July. So the Planning Commission was asked to solicit public input on what to do with the sunset clause, whether the city ought to allow the ordinance to expire and discontinue short-term rentals, or possibly extend the sunset date and give it more time to evaluate, or alternatively, I think the ordinance, the draft proposal that'll be coming before you would also consider just allowing or removing the sunset provisions so that the ordinance could continue. So that's really the question that I think the council's looking for the Planning Commission's input, and you'll be holding a public hearing on that April 26th. The next meeting, there is currently no business scheduled for May 10th, which I believe would be the next meeting, or May 11th. Anyway, first meeting in May, there's no business scheduled presently. We'll let you know, Rob, if there's anything coming up, and ask for your direction on scheduling that. Then the next meeting for the Planning Commission would be the joint session with the City Council on May 18th to discuss the implementation of House Bill 2001. There will be a preview, or it's an initial presentation by the consultant at that meeting. Erik will be leading that, looking for your feedback on the approach and kind of the council's input at that point on the public process moving forward. The next meeting, the second meeting in May, will be a work session on that deliverable, or those first deliverables from the consultant. I believe there's a neighborhood character analysis, an opportunities report, and a number of other work products from that first phase of our study. And then the following meeting, the first meeting in June, will be the second of the two work sessions on review of that first phase of our work on House Bill 2001. So really a lot of emphasis, or a lot of effort on this middle housing work over the next 4 meetings. So anyway, with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you have any further questions about our work program for House Bill 2001, Erik is still here, and we're happy to answer your questions.
Commissioner Beckett.
Some major issues that we seem to be dodging. One is, how do we as a city zone for all the waterfront property we have there in the face of HB 2001? For instance, the Willamette River, lakefront property, the Tualatin River. These are major considerations where the fits under the provision of the natural resources, I think, that's in the bill. We need to make sure we have the ability to zone properly around those natural resources.
I could go ahead and attempt to answer that question. I think, we've at least attempted to address this in the responses previously in meetings, so I apologize if that hasn't been clear. I think the sort of short answer is that, we're hoping to, we can get a lot more specificity on how, the ways that we can zone for things like natural resources as they relate to sensitive lands specifically. So when it comes to middle housing, we do have additional flexibility for siting and design, regulations to respond to certain elements. So really, we're going to be talking about some of the responses that can be taken. One of the things that, we could design our sort of standards around would be those considerations. But I would point out that there's a lot of existing, zoning within the city for sensitive lands that is designed to sort of handle those circumstances. We have overlays for Oswego Lake. We have overlays for the Willamette River Greenway. We have, riparian area overlays. We have a number of sensitive lands, areas, streams, wetland corridors, et cetera. So there's a lot to that, and I'm not sure, Scott, if you have anything to add in terms of, what conversations I guess we could have moving forward on sort of goal protected resources as relates to implementation.
No, I wouldn't have anything to add under the schedule update. I think over the next 3 meetings, including the joint session with the council and the 2 work sessions with this commission, in terms of the schedule, that's how we envision it, addressing the questions or the concerns that you've raised, Commissioner Beckett, among a myriad of other issues that we're going to have to define as far as moving forward. So we haven't forgotten. We're still tracking the natural resource issues.
Right.
Any other questions? Schedule review? None? Right. Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think that was it. We'll adjourn the meeting. Thanks for all the good discussion tonight. Good night.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks, staff.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.